So welcome to Whole Wellness with Anne. I'm glad you guys are joining me today on this 9th video of gaslighting, and it is the final video we're doing. Thank you for joining me. So we've been talking about gaslighting primarily because one of the things that I've been dealing with in the wake of getting my sister's second email or text in July of this year is the frustration, self-directed, because I've been so blind and because I've so desperately wanted to have a relationship with my sister, mend the misunderstandings and the conflicts we've had in the past, get close again, and get back to where we were, that I have completely been blind to her gaslighting me. And I want to be very careful to remind everyone that I love my sister very much and that I'm not angry at her, that I harbor no resentment or bitterness towards her. I understand completely why she is the way she is and why she's behaving the way she's behaving. My sister is the forgotten child in our family of 8, and I'm the scapegoated child in our family of 8. I'm the lone wolf with regards to getting counseling in 2020 and being committed to a healthy life and a healthy mindset. My entire life, I never knew that I didn't have healthy relationships. I didn't even know what healthy was. I didn't know that that was something that was worth paying attention to, because I wasn't raised to pay attention to that sort of thing. So I've spent my entire life, relationship after relationship after relationship, friendships, family, work relationships, you name it, with people that were not good for me. Now, that's not to say that I've had no good relationships or no healthy relationships. It's just that I've never looked at my role in the world and how I might influence or impact the world in a healthy way. And that coming from my relationships, like, what is my role in the world? What is my purpose? What are my gifts? Why am I here? And I think sometimes, at maybe some of us more frequently than others, probably ask ourselves that question at some point in time in our lives. And it was that triggering job experience in 2019 that I left, and then wound up spending 2019 well into 2020 in the advent, or onslaught, I should say, of COVID, where I found I could not control the emotions that were plaguing me, the bitterness and anger and resentment that was plaguing me after that triggering job experience. And I asked a coworker who happened to be a licensed family counselor, hey, what do you think about this? And then he suggested we meet, and I spent 18 months, beginning in June of 2020, in counseling, discovering that my entire life I've had these blinders up. And I've essentially, for lack of a better phrase, I've been in survival mode my entire life. I've been living my life according to the 4 trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I have a reputation in my family for being a fighter, just disagreeable, because I'm the scapegoated child. So, and so I'm different than everybody else in my family. But like I started to say, I'm the only person that has sought help. And given that all 8 members of my family are relatively unhealthy to varying degrees, which I've talked about in so many videos on this channel, different circumstances and different ways in which we're unhealthy. My sister and I, of course, being the primary theme and story that I've shared with you throughout this series on gaslighting, and our relationship, our entire lives. I'm 51 this year, and she just turned 47 a couple of weeks ago. So our entire lives has been spent being each other's person, being BFFs. Being the one person in each other's lives that we could count on come hell or high water, bearing all secrets and judgments and everything. Like, we have been each other's soulmate, so to speak. And up until the last couple of years. And my sister is convinced that it is because we had a text misunderstanding, ironically, in July of 2020, just a couple months into my counseling, as I learned about healthy boundaries and self-respect and in my family's unhealthy way of living and their behaviors and mannerisms and stuff that my sister's convinced, and it's taken me this long. My sister's convinced that that's where our relationship went wrong. And it's taken me this long, until 2024, to kind of look at our relationship, look back at the past and the history. And when I got her text in July of 2024, which I just went through and reviewed line by line, word for word in video number 8, where the light bulb finally went on, and it felt like a ton of bricks was dropped on me, like, I realized what was going on. And I had an inkling. I kind of knew back in 2022, when she first lambasted me and came out of nowhere with this big lengthy text similar to the one I got in July, blaming me and accusing me for, screwing up our relationship, so to speak, and saying mistruths and misconstruing things and forgetting all the efforts and the ways I've tried to heal our relationship and bring us back together. And it's just, I tried to talk to her back then in 2022, and I talked about that. I think it was video 6. I talked about that. And I have been banging my head against the wall for years. It took the second text 2 years later for me to kind of look back at everything that's been happening with us and documenting the events and the trend and looking at the documentation, because, as former abuse victims, we don't believe ourselves. We've been trained not to believe our own memories. And so I've talked about this in my channel before, and I talked about it, I think it was in video 3 or 4, where I talked about documentation. And I have a background in human resources, and my training, my professional training, tells us to document everything. And so I have personally and professionally been trained to document everything, because I don't trust my memory. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with doubting yourself. I think it's good to put our own perspectives and opinions under a microscope once in a while and evaluate whether we are either misunderstanding or misremembering or forgetting. Because I've done it myself, where I've misremembered something or misrepresented something, and I went back and went, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that other thing. And then I'm like, whoa, okay, now I'm clear. So I have a tendency, and I've talked about that in the series, like after my sister and I talked and stuff, I documented so much stuff. I wrote down dates, I reread texts. And so I have had for many years now very solid data, for lack of a better word, about what has transpired between my sister and I. And I also have emails going back to what I believe was the beginning of our relationship being fractured, which was in 2012, when my sister decided to have an affair with a married man from her church. And she and I lived on opposite sides of the country at the time. And it wasn't until 2014 when I moved back to my hometown, and was not so much emailing with her. But in those early days, we had a good 2 solid years of us emailing back and forth about this relationship she had. And I still have that Yahoo email account, and I still have all those old emails where we went back and forth. And we, at that time, said some pretty nasty things to each other. And I want to make sure I interject here a little byline, or disclaimer, whatever you want to call it, that says, I'm not innocent in this whole fiasco with my sister and I. And I recognize that. I'm not innocent, and I don't want to imply to you that I'm innocent. I have said things and I have done things that have been, inspired by hurt and anger and fear. Initially, when my sister decided to have this affair, I was shocked. And I treaded gently at first, and I warned her, this is not a good idea. Don't get involved. And she threw caution to the wind. She ignored me. She disagreed, and she had a right to make her own decision about her relationships. But what wound up happening is the more I tried to convince her that this was a big mistake, the more she pushed back and the more she wanted this relationship. There was something about this man, and I think I know what it is, but I don't want to theorize right now about what it might be. But this man has manipulated my sister, and hence my sister is, this is my theory anyway, that my sister is pushing back and pushing outwards towards others, me being the primary recipient of her obstinance and her angst because we were the closest. I was the closest person to her, that she needs some outlet for her frustrations. And so, sorry, I'm getting thirsty and I had a drink. What did I do with my drink? Oh my gosh, I think I left it out in my kitchen. But when I talk, I get thirsty and my lips get dry. And it's wintertime where I live, so pardon me while I put more lip balm on. And you know what? Hold on a second. I gotta go get my drink. I'll be right back. Listen to the plowing while I go get my drink. The scrape, scrape, scrape of the plow. Oh, wow, guys. Remember how I've talked to you before about how I like to mix beverages? I found the best combination. So I usually chug water when I'm working out or whatever. When I'm not drinking water, I try to drink low calorie or no calorie beverages. I drink a lot of hot tea. My favorite is Harney & Sons cinnamon spice, hot cinnamon spice. I like ginger, lemon. I like some of the berry teas, but not to get totally sidetracked, but this combination I just found is zero sugar Starry or Twist Up or 7-Up or Sprite or something. One of those clear carbonated beverages with zero sugar mixed with Simply Peach. I've been for months drinking the Simply Limeade mixed with that, and it's so refreshing in the summertime. But I just bought a Simply Peach and mixed it like 2/3 zero sugar Starry or Sprite or whatever, and then 1/3 Simply Peach. So it reduces the sugar you're drinking, but it gives you a really flavorful, strong, flavorful beverage, to have. And my husband and I and my kids, we're always whining about soda pop companies and how they're so full of sugar, and I don't understand why they can't make a half sugar beverage. Why does diet taste so crappy and the full sugar stuff is just so insanely sweet? Can't they meet somewhere in the middle and make something that, like a Mountain Dew that has 20 grams of sugar instead of 45 or whatever it is? Anyway, this combination is fantastic. Yeah, I did 2/3, 1/3, and it's just perfect. You can still taste the peach. I don't know where I'm going to put my beverage. I don't want to set it on my couch and have it spill. And I also don't want to knock my camera over. So let's set it there on my table. So my sister and I's relationship throughout this entire time has had some major hurdles, which is what I've talked about in this series. All of the hills and valleys that we have walked through together in varying circumstances to get to this point where in July of 2020, when we had this text disagreement, we should have been able to have our disagreement and eventually come back together. But what wound up happening is I spent a great deal of time and energy basically begging her to talk to me early on. In the first couple weeks after this text argument, she refused. I literally was begging my sister to talk to me, to have a conversation. At the same time, deep down inside, I really wanted to share with her all of what I was experiencing with regards to getting into counseling, because when I got into counseling, it was not on my radar that I had issues within my family. I mean, I have had issues within my family for years. I just thought I was the problem this whole time. So when I got into counseling and I started awakening to how we were raised in a very unhealthy environment, my siblings and I, and how our parents were very unhealthy in different ways, and how us being raised very unhealthy and my parents being unhealthy and their families being unhealthy and how their marriage fell apart and all this other stuff, how crystal clear it explained so many problems and so many issues within our family. And she wouldn't have any of it. And I wasn't trying to convince her of my truth that I discovered in counseling. We never got to talk about it. She never even heard about what I was going through in counseling. She never heard about my counselor. She never even opened up her ears for 5 minutes to find out why I went to counseling and what I'd learned. So back in 2020, when we had this text disagreement, after we had each said our piece and gotten angry at each other, I'm so sorry for the noise in the background. I'm super glad they're plowing. They're clearing off a bunch of slush and snow and ice and stuff, but it's noisy in the background. Sorry about that. When we had that text disagreement, what should have happened is it should have, after we said our piece and was angry with each other and regretted what we said and everything, we should have been able to apologize to each other and go, you know, I'm really sorry I said that to you. I can understand why it made you upset. This is how I'm feeling. You know, how are you feeling? And we should have been able to have a conversation, and we should have been able to share with each other how we were feeling and what our boundaries were with regards to maybe political things that have been addressed between us. And we would have at least had the conversation where each of us said, you know what, I get it. I can understand why you felt the way you felt. I feel differently. Can we come to some sort of agreement about what we will and what we won't do moving forward so that we can come back together, heal what was fractured during the text disagreement, and go forward from here? But that's not what happened at all. It just snowballed from there. And we were never able to come back together. And I took this was the big mistake I made. I took the responsibility because I had been to counseling. I knew what was going on. I saw the red flags. I knew what the problems were. I should have been able to fix things. Oh, you haven't heard that before. You haven't thought that before, right? Yes, we have. Because we think that we can. It's a very codependent train of thought to have, to think that we can fix anything. And it was very wrong and very codependent of me to believe that I could convince my sister or prove to my sister the right way of having a healthy relationship. And she wasn't having any of it. She did not want to talk to me. She did not want to listen to what I had learned about in counseling. She didn't care. And it's evidenced in the text that she sent me in March of 2022, or actually she sent me the text in February of 22, and we didn't talk until several weeks later in March of 22. And then the follow-up text in July of this year. There are things that she says in these texts. Go back and watch those prior videos for more information. Actually, as a side note, I would very much encourage you to start at the beginning and watch the series sequentially, because it tells a story. It literally tells a story. And if you watch the, video number 6 before you watch 3, 4, and 5 or whatever, you're going to be like, what? Or you may even have an opinion like, why is that a big deal? Why do you even care, Ian? That's because there's 75 other things that happened before that. It wasn't just this one thing. So if you have the time, or as you have time, I encourage you to go back and at the very least just pop your earbuds in at work or whatever while you're in the car driving somewhere and just kind of listen to how the story unfolded and all the things that I tried to do to maintain a healthy relationship with my sister, or even if at back in 2020, 2021, what I was trying to do is, if my sister wasn't willing to talk about what it meant to be healthy and my counseling and what I'd learned and everything like that, I was convinced that I could show her what it meant to be healthy and have a healthy relationship. And I was willing to do that, but the problem was that I was being gaslit. And that's where we get to the crux of this entire series and why I did this series in great detail. Because you can't do everything yourself. You just can't. If you try to maintain a relationship with someone who is going to continue to gaslight you and manipulate you, if not abuse you, and they just continue, as my sister has proven to me, to just suck the joy and the gratitude and the peace and the love out of your heart and your soul when you're with them and you spend time with them, that's not a healthy relationship. You're self-destructing. It's counterproductive to being a healthy person. So that is the crux of this entire series, is the volume of time, the volume of effort that I have spent in trying to get back to where my sister and I used to be. But she has not been willing to do the same thing. But since my sister is not a healthy person, there are behaviors and habits that she has developed over the years that has made her see the situation with her own blinders up. And what has made the situation worse, and what we've talked about in this series, is not only does she have blinders up, they've been closed by this relationship that she's in. The man that she's with has been manipulating her and taking advantage of her. And according to her, the relationship works. So she just continues to do what she's always done. She continues to develop into an even unhealthier person. This is what I've seen happen from the outside, not knowing a lot of detail anymore about what's going on with their relationship. In the present day, I've just seen the trend of my sister completely change from this person that I would have described 15 years ago to you as an angel on earth. And I used to tell my husband that. He's a witness, by the way. I'm very fortunate. A lot of people don't have a witness. But my husband is a witness to the change that has happened between my sister and I, and how the relationship has changed and how she's changed as a person. My sister used to be, I described her as an angel on earth. That's the kind of person my sister was. And now I have a very hard time describing her without feeling mean when I talk about her, but she's completely detached from any sort of tenderness, emotion, and compassion. She gives me the impression that she has completely shut down internally who she is, and she's adapted someone else's life, and she is living the life of someone that is imagined and in her heart. It's like almost like the story of the Grinch, which is ironic. It's Christmas time. Let's talk about that. So you know how in the story of the Grinch, they say that the Grinch's heart was 2 sizes too small? And so he was angry and lashed out at people, and it was the story of his traumatic past, and that's why he acted the way he did. And people didn't really know him. They thought he was this mean one, Mr. Grinch. But that's not really who he was. He had just been hurt so badly, and that's the situation with my sister. Something is, and I'm not sure exactly what the dynamic is. I have theories about her and the man that she's with right now, her husband, which is the man she had the affair with. And yes, they are still together. One could say that I'm the fool because clearly they've had a long relationship together, but I think the reason their relationship has stood the test of time thus far, 12 years, is because of the extensive abuse and manipulation that my sister has been subjected to, that she is, as the forgotten child, unaware of and unable to get to this point where she has the blinders off and is awakened. And I didn't help that, as I told you about in this series, that early on when she first decided to have the affair with this man, we got to this point where we had these emails back and forth, and I lashed out at her in anger. And she wound up giving me an ultimatum because I called her stupid for getting involved with this man. And she said, listen up, if you do not accept him and our relationship, you're going to lose me. And at that time, I was so terrified, and I didn't understand what I was dealing with, and I didn't know how to handle conflict appropriately. This was way back in 2012, 2013, way before I was in counseling. And I instantly was like, okay, this is a no-brainer. I'm not losing you. So I promptly shut my mouth, accepted their relationship, and just said she's in charge of her own decisions. I'm not saying anything anymore. But what wound up happening is me stifling my emotions, me not being honest with myself or with her in any conversation. And that's why in the series, I've kind of shown you how many years I've wasted being an unhealthy person, not loving my sister the way I should be loving her. If I had been healthy at the time, I would have accepted her ultimatum and said, that's up to you. I would have said to her, you know what, if you choose this man over me and you sever ties with us, that's your choice. That's your responsibility, and you need to carry that responsibility yourself. However, I'm never going to stop telling you that choosing to have an affair is wrong. That is according to my moral compass. Now, that's also not to say that if you're a person who's chosen to have an affair, that you're a bad person. What I'm saying that is it does not align with my moral compass, and I'm going to continue saying that it's wrong. But the thing is, we all do make mistakes as well. And if you're a person who has chosen or screwed up to have an affair and now you regret it and you're accountable for it and you're everyday proving to your now partner that you can be trusted and you're very transparent with them and you're apologetic and accountable, that's a totally different ball of wax. So I don't want to misconstrue, because I know there might be viewers watching this going, oh, wait a minute. I've had an affair, I've screwed up, and I don't want to trigger you into feeling guilt and shame when you've tried to reconcile and move forward and you're in a relationship where you're trying every day to be better and do better with your significant other. So my sister, though, back then was extremely obstinate about having this relationship with this man, and I, in turn, was terrified to lose her. I knew back then that this man was not good for her, that he brought her down. It really had nothing to do with their affair after some time. Initially, it was just that he was still married, and why wouldn't they just wait until he was divorced? But had I been healthy and had I shown my sister true love, I would have said that to her. I would have said, if you're going to give me an ultimatum, that is on your shoulders. I don't own any of that, but I'm also not going to pretend that I'm okay with your affair. And that would have been that. That's showing love. That's doing the right thing. However, instead I reacted with anger. I promptly shut up when she gave me the ultimatum and proceeded to spend the next 8 years in torment over the continued efforts I put into trying to understand and accept him and their relationship. Because from afar, I look at him and I look at the relationship and I'm like, don't you see it? I can't believe that no one else sees the problem with their relationship. Mark my words, there is going to come a day when he's going to devastate my sister and break her heart. I can't stand the fact that that's going to come. But their relationship is not the kind of relationship that stands the test of time. They are not that kind of couple. It's a very strange situation. He is very much a chameleon and extremely charismatic to the point where your skin crawls. My skin crawls when I'm around him, which is why I have tried so hard to accept him and I have failed miserably. There is just something about this guy that screams dishonest, skeezy. I'm not a big fan. I'm okay in small talk with him, but and in crowds, but a one-on-one situation, I have to no. I know his mom, his family, his kids, and there's just something that's not right. I'm not going to try to label and pinpoint something specific that's wrong with all of them. It's just, I have spent enough time around him and his closest people to know that there's something not right. And I don't want to pretend to know exactly what it is and label and judge him. But at the same time, as I mentioned in this series, video number 4, I think, my tail tingles anytime I'm around him, the over the hedge reference. So all this series to say that it's not worth the years. It's not worth your energy and your anxiety. I mean, to deal with someone who's gaslighting you and to try to navigate that relationship for more than however long you insert the amount of time that works for you, it pulls you away from all the other amazing stuff and amazing relationships in your life. Like, you could be working on your hobbies, you could be traveling, you could be developing relationships with other people, you could start your own YouTube channel, you could be writing a book, you could be doing any number of things, taking further education classes, applying for a promotion at your job, going to counseling with your significant other if there's problems there. But if you're in any sort of relationship, whether it be familial or romantic or church member or teammate, where you feel like you're being gaslit, you gotta set goals for yourself and you have to have standards for yourself. You're worth more than the amount of unnecessary energy that you've spent on this relationship if, and I say if, this person is not meeting you halfway or even budging. Now, sometimes I will say it takes time to work towards coming back together after a significant blow up or conflict. And we want to be very careful, especially and in particular with marital relationships where there might be children involved too, to not just cut people off and sever the ties and walk away and do anything hasty. So I don't want you to misconstrue what I'm saying as, just be done with it. It's not worth your time. I'm not saying that lightly. I don't take this situation lightly. It's taken me 12 years, and I say 12 years because the first 8 I was unhealthy. My sister thinks it's only been 4 since the text disagreement in July of 2020, but it has been a lot longer. My sister and I's relationship began to fracture apart when she decided to have this affair, because I'll tell you why it started back then. That is when my sister began to change, and she started compromising her morals. Her cognitive dissonance just exploded, and she began to live this life of a person I don't know. So that's why I reference the big change happening, or the big fracture happening between us way back in 2012 when I first found out about this relationship she was having. And it started out, let me remind you, as her asking me what I thought about starting this relationship. And I strongly cautioned her, and she went, I don't need your opinion. So it's about the timing though. For one person, a friendship that they're dealing with someone they think they're being gaslit, maybe it's a person you've known for only a year or two, just don't even bother. Don't waste any more time. Just sever the ties. But if you have a lot invested, let's say it's a relationship with someone at work that, you've been at this job for 25 years and they've just been hired in the last year or whatever, I'd stick it out. I'd try to stay away from them if possible, but you've got a lot vested. That's why I accept this situation with marital relationships and children involved, because there's a lot more that you're willing to put up with, or that you should put up with, in order to protect and help others involved in the periphery. But if it's just you and someone else, and it's a very low risk and there's very low investment for you, just be done with it. Don't waste any more time. Don't keep banging your head against the wall. So when we talk about this relationship with this person, right, and we're trying to figure out if they're gaslighting us and we're trying to figure out what to do next, one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to analyze the relationship to find out, really, are they gaslighting or am I just being stubborn? Because a gaslighter will accuse you of being stubborn. Gaslighter will blame you for all kinds of things and have you doubting yourself and doubting what you could have done or what you didn't do. And so always in a gaslighting relationship, we'll be analyzing our own role. And that's very important. And it's useful because even though it can be confusing at times, what you're looking for is whether or not that person is working their way towards you as you're working your way towards them. Not necessarily a keeping score, like meeting it halfway, 50-50, but just making progress, right? One of the telltale signs for me, and one of the reasons it was like this past July when I got the text from my sister, was like, she is saying the same stuff in her text now that she said 2 years ago in her first ass chewing text, even though we met and talked afterwards. But remember, I said in that video when I went through that whole story, when I left that talk with my sister, I felt like we hadn't accomplished anything and we didn't come closer together. So I kind of knew already that she was gaslighting me. I knew that our relationship hadn't healed at all, but she thought it did. And she thought we were going to start over at the beginning. And she thought we were somewhere where we weren't. And like I said, she's kind of detached from reality. I mean, I'm trying to be nice here. She is way detached from reality, if I'm going to be real. So when I got this second text, I was like, oh my gosh, here we go again. We're no further along than what we were 2 years ago, much less 4 years ago when we had the text misunderstanding or disagreement. So that's when it really struck me. And as I was trying to respond to her text in July 2024, and I kept starting to type, delete, starting to type, delete. And I found myself defending myself at every turn and exhausting myself after an hour and a half saying, I can't send anything because there's no way that we're going to make progress. I already know how she's going to respond to everything I try to explain to her. She is going to continue to blame shift. She's going to continue to blame me. She's going to continue to believe the lies. She's going to continue to twist things around. And it's just not progressing. So why am I working so hard? Why are you working so hard? You want to have the other person that you're in a relationship with, if they're gaslighting you, you're not going to be making any progress. If someone is not gaslighting you, they're willing to make the moves towards you as you make the moves towards them. You want someone who's going to be saying to you, please explain to me what I did wrong so that I know what not to do in the future. Even if they don't say it in that many words. Or someone that says, you know what, you really pissed me off when you said that. You really hurt my feelings when you said that. What did I do that bothered you? Or, please tell me so that I can understand how we got to this place. Or someone that says, what is it about our current conflict that is bothering you? What is the problem from your perspective? Any variation of those kinds of statements just demonstrates to you that this is a person who really is interested in understanding. On the contrast, you're going to have the kinds of things from a gaslighter that my sister has said in her texts. Video number 6 and video number 8, or video number 7. Sorry, I'm a little gray on which video I talked about what, without an outline in front of me. When someone is blaming you for the entire conflict, when they're the ones that have on numerous occasions rejected you and not sought out the truth and twisted things around and imagined things that didn't happen and blatantly lied and doesn't even acknowledge that you have made the effort and says instead that you still haven't stepped up, even though you have proof, i.e. your own documentation, that you have stepped up. And then the worst of the worst, someone who is absolutely unequivocally unaccountable for what they've done wrong. You may have a situation with someone who, doesn't agree with you, but if they did something or said something or behaved in a way that was contrary to what you've already stated before is a boundary of yours, then they need to own that. They need to say, oh gosh, you know what? You're right. You did tell me 2 years ago not to text you at work. And I know you work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and I texted you at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, this very important thing, and I shouldn't have done that because it distracts you from your work, or whatever the case may be. If you state your boundaries and you've stated your boundaries, and that's why I did so much documentation. I take notes and I say, you know what? I'm going to create a note in my phone and say, okay, on this date at this time, this is what I texted, emailed, called, whatever, and told this person. And then you can go back and reference and go, wow, I've told you that it's not acceptable to text me about something important as this at work, wait until the end of the day, and yet you keep doing it. That's someone who is denying your boundaries. That's someone who disrespecting you. That's someone who does not care about what your needs are. And we shouldn't ignore that. We shouldn't excuse it. We need to have relationships with people in our lives that are willing to work as hard on themselves in an effort to come closer together with us as we are working on ourselves. You can't pull all of the weight. You can't and shouldn't probably be pulling even 90% of the weight. If you're pulling 60 to 70% of the weight because you're dealing with someone who has their own issues too, and you're at least working on it, maybe sometimes you're going to be given 60 and they're going to be given 40, and sometimes they might be given 70 when you're given only 30. I mean, that shifts back and forth, but eventually at some point in time, you come back together, you become closer, you have a reestablished intimacy, you have an understanding. And that's what it's all about. Good, healthy relationships and coming together and building each other up and being there for each other. What is the point of a relationship with someone who just exhausts us? If you have a month of time with this person and 25 of those days are very average days, there's nothing super exciting and fun that happens, but no serious conflicts or anything. And then you have one day where it's like, oh my gosh, you have so much fun. You go out to the movies, you go to dinner, you just have a great time with this person. And then 2 or 3 of the days, there's an argument, a blow up that happens. You lose sleep, you're exhausted, and that carries forward to the next month. And then all of a sudden you have the next month of 20 days where things are okay, but 5 of those days are spent exhausting yourself and losing sleep and trying to figure out how to navigate this relationship. And then maybe you have 2 days out of the month where it's really good and you have fun and everything and you feel like you're close together, but the 5 days are not fun and they're bad. And then carry forward another month and all of a sudden the next argument. And you may even go 2 months where there's 45 days where they're pretty good, but then you have 10 days where it's like that person's not talking to you. They're giving you the cold shoulder. They're compromising your boundaries. They're blaming you. They're telling you that everything would be fine if only you did this, and making you mentally feeling just depleted and just sucking the life right out of you. That's someone that you need to get your distance from in a serious way. I mean that in all seriousness. The whole point of this series is to communicate to you guys, please don't waste too much of your time. There are certain relationships where you might be highly invested that you need to think long and hard about the situation before you decide to leave that person who might be gaslighting you. But once you discover that this person is gaslighting you and you have proof because you've documented or what you said or what's going on, you need to seriously consider getting away from them. The peace of mind and the joy and the gratitude that comes from within when you are not around toxic people who are depleting you and you're around people and investing in relationships that fill you up and you fill them up And everybody together is rising up to this place where life and love and light are prominent. That's worth the investment. Why waste your time on the other kind of relationship that just sucks the energy from you? So one more final note before I close this video number 9, I wanted to remind you guys that gaslighting, the word comes from that 1944 movie called Gaslight, which I have never seen, but it is on my list. It stars Ingrid Bergman, and it's a story about a man who murdered this lady, and this was an unsolved murder. And years later, he marries the lady's niece. The niece obviously doesn't know that this man murdered her aunt, but he knows the relationship. And the woman thinks that she married for love, and she stumbles upon some evidence that he's the one who murdered her aunt. And he finds out that she is suspicious of him. So he starts doing all this stuff to make her feel crazy, so that she doesn't believe that he killed her. She actually winds up believing that she's losing her mind and she's imagining things. That, to me, sounds like a fascinating storyline for a movie. It's compelling to me that it's a storyline from a movie from 1944, so many years ago. It's someone trying to get away with bad behavior. That's the short version of the moral of the story. Someone tries to get away with bad behavior, and in order to get away with their bad behavior, they're tricking somebody else. When someone's trying to get away with bad behavior, they're going to try to make others believe that they're crazy. Gaslighters are simply trying to get away with their own bad behavior. The reason that my sister and I's relationship has this chasm between us is because she keeps trying to convince me that her own bad behavior is okay, that it's excusable. And I keep objecting to that and refusing to accept that it's okay for her to behave this way. And that's why we have a chasm between us. That's why we can't spend time together, because there is no more intimacy between us. We've both changed. The current situation that my sister and I are in are because both of us have chosen a very distinct and individual path for ourselves. My sister's over here with this man, and she's going down this path. And I'm over here in my life after getting counseling and got my eye on the prize, healthy, but we're going like this. And there's no way to get back. Either I am going to need to compromise my healthy to go this way, or she is going to have to compromise her manipulation and go this way. Start looking at healthy or be crooked. This is not going to happen. I don't know about this. I really don't know. I have done this series for your benefit in hopes that you guys look at your relationships and make sure that you don't waste your precious time. You're a valuable person who has lots to offer, and there's no reason to waste that on people who take you for granted and keep abusing you and blaming you. You know, if you've done something wrong and you own that, there's nothing at all wrong with saying, yeah, I could have done that. I should have done that. You're right. But by the way, how about you step your toe to the line as well and own your role in this conflict we're having? It takes two to tango. Thanks so much for tuning me in the series on gaslighting. I appreciate you guys. I hope it's been helpful, and I hope you guys have an awesome day and continue to live in love with each other. Bye.